The party arrives at Tresdell for the summer festival. They drive Gustave's 2 carts through the town and arrive at the square where there are many booths set up for the festivities. Gustave thanks them and pays them each 50 gold. He gives Quinta 25 after she heckles him, and presents them a tiny dragonborn carving to remember him by. Quinta immediately goes to the food stand to buy beer. Leith purchases a bouquet of flowers from the cleric booth and gives Bowie one, who eats it. Luce buys some glowing sunstones for the party from Iliada, an elf. Shay goes to the food booth and buys some sun cakes from Sam and Big Jim. Shay gives a sun cake to Bowie and discovers that they give 1 temporary HP. Shay splits the rest of the sun cakes between the party. Leith runs back to the flower booth and buys a yellow flower crown. Thalum speaks to Iliada in Elven, and she talks about her apothecary that she runs in Tresdell. He tosses her a gold piece. Luce buys a beer while Leith puts a flower crown on Crow's horns. Thalum heads over to the darts and Quinta follows, ready for a challenge. Leith asks Sam if they have wine at the food stand. He says yes, and then sprints back to the tavern, grabs some wine, and comes back sweaty and out of breath to serve it to her. Quinta and Thalum each throw their darts. They both pop balloons, but get increasingly competitive. Quinta attempts a trick shot, but hits the man running the booth in the shoulder with her dart. Thalum completes his trick shot and wins a little deck of playing cards. The two of them go back to the food booth for more beer. Sam eagerly tries to interact with them, but they aggressively shut him down. Leith goes over to the dart booth and pops a balloon. Quinta and Thalum continue drinking and complaining about elves. Shay and Leith take Bowie to watch the gnome twins Bip and Bop playing music. Leith gives Shay a red flower. Luce and Crow join them, but Luce quickly goes off to grab another beer. As they walk past Iliada, the elf gives Luce a strange look. Luce greets Sam, chugs a beer, and spikes the wooden stein onto the ground. It bounces awkwardly, but the human woman behind the clothing booth gives a reassuring, "Yas!" Luce picks up on the awkward tension Thalum has towards Leith. Leith goes up to Iliada. Iliada looks at Leith as if she recognizes her but brushes it off. Iliada asks Leith if she's from Orleithir and seems nervous. She explains she used to have an apothecary in Orleithir but moved to Tresdell. Leith recognizes her and they bond over both having to leave their home city. Iliada gives her a sunstone as a mark of friendship and invites her to visit her at her apothecary at some point. Thalum and Quinta go to the test of strength next. Quinta goes into a rage, misses the target, and puts a crater in the beautiful square of Tresdell. Thalum takes his turn and almost gets the bell to ring. He wins a tiny hammer bottle opener. Thalum gives it to Bowie. The rest of the party comes over to the test of strength, but Thalum wants distance from Leith and takes Quinta to get more beer. Shay takes a turn at the test of strength, steps in Quinta's crater, and almost hits Crow with the hammer. The operator of the booth feels bad and gives her another try. Shay raises the mallet over her head, accidentally lets go, and sends it into the cleric booth behind her. Crow goes to retrieve the hammer as the clerics heal the person who is struck by the flying weapon. Leith takes a turn at the test of strength. Bowie gives a war shriek right before she brings the hammer down, startling her into striking the target perfectly. The bell dings and Leith wins some gold. Quinta starts getting tipsy after her 4th beer. Luce attempts the test of strength with the help of Crow but doesn't win. They consider Eldritch blasting the bell but resist the temptation. Bip and Bop make an announcement that the puppet show will be starting soon. The party goes over to watch, with Quinta planning on hate watching when they mention it is about the war against the goblins. Luce questions Leith about Thalum as they wait for the puppet show to start. Leith reveals she is from elven nobility and her family has been looking for her. She explains Thalum is one of the people tasked with finding her and bringing her home. The elf queen taught him the elven lullaby as a way to help find Leith. The puppet show starts, interrupting their conversation. Thalum talks to Iliada again, threatening her for knowing Leith's identity. This confirms Iliada's suspicions, but also sends her into a panic. Thalum leaves to watch the puppet show. The puppet show depicts the legendary Prolia of Tresdell calling on the magic of Pelor to vanquish the goblin army. Quinta is not pleased. Bip and Bop pop out from behind their cart to bow. Thalum returns to Iliada and shows her his army badge and his elven rings. This makes her so uncomfortable she flees the square. Quinta, raging from the puppet show, takes another try at the test of strength, but is too drunk to win. Leith and Luce duck into a back alley to talk. Luce says they know that the elves have been divided in Orleithir. Leith reveals that she is the elven princess and that she is close with the elven ambassador, who will be present at the council meeting. Leith picks up that Luce is also apparently hiding something. Shay joins Thalum and Quinta at the food booth. Sam accidentally gives Shay wine instead of juice, and when Shay realizes her juice is spicy, Sam runs to fix the problem. Leith gives Shay some bread, worried about Shay having alcohol for the first time. Leith and Thalum go off to have a conversation. When Leith was on the run, she stayed at an inn that was run by Thalum and his half-elf wife. The wife reminded Leith of her own mother, so Leith gave the woman the ring her mother had given her. Leith had originally escaped Orlaithir with her lover, but he was captured and, presumably, killed when he would not reveal the princess's location. Leith reveals she was the one who gave Thalem's wife the ring, and had once stayed in his inn. Leith warns Thalem about the elven ambassador at the council meeting, and Thalem explains he has already butted heads with this man before. Lady Harapel emerges from the church and addresses the crowd to mark the end of the festival. As she descends the steps of the church, Quinta runs over to her to ask for admittance to the council meeting, because the kobolds are enslaving the goblin people. Leith, seeing Quinta is drunk and also just not good at social interactions, steps in. She explains the situation, and Harapel tells them the next meeting is the following day at noon, offers Quinta the goblin seat at the council, and gives Leith a seal to admit them into the meeting house and get them a room for the evening. The party goes to Big Jim's tavern and shows the seal. He doesn't have any rooms available, but he offers them the wine cellar. Sam brings blankets and pillows, and Bowie and Quinta drink from one of the tapped barrels. The party begins to discuss the plan for the council meeting. Lilith creates a temporary mind link between Luce and Leith so they can communicate in secret. Luce encourages Leith to tell the rest of the party what to expect at the council meeting. Leith reveals to the party she is of elven nobility and ran away 50 years ago. She also warns them of the elven ambassador, who she is close to and might want to take her back with him. Quinta, upset she has to rely on elven nobility for help, pukes in the corner and goes to sleep. Luce asks Leith why she left Orlaithir. Leith says she left to learn more about what the rest of the world thought about her people. Thalem shows off his other ring and explains in the forest he once saved an elf from being attacked by a dwarf with a gun, the very gun Thalem now uses. When other elves arrived at the scene, Celladorne, the elven ambassador, was with them, and was angered that Thalem was even there. The queen, however, was appreciative of Thalem coming to the elves' defense, and gave him a ring. She asked Thalem to help find her daughter and taught him the lullaby. Leith tells the party about how she stayed at Thalem's inn and gave a ring to Thalem's wife. Thalem has a flashback from the night his wife was killed by a creature. From the description from Thalem, Leith knows the creature's general hunting area and the pattern it moves in. Luce is familiar with the trading of monster parts and thinks they might be able to narrow down what it is with more information. Thalem uses the rings to ground himself and bring himself back to the present. Leith suggests they could use the supplies and knowledge in Orlaithir to deal with the monster. The party goes to sleep, has breakfast at the inn, and then heads to the council meeting. Leith takes out her lyre that the elven ambassador gifted to her. The party goes through the public gardens and arrives at the meeting house. Leith shows them the seal, and once the party puts their weapons in a lockbox, they go forward into the meeting house. The party members put their hoods up as they enter. Quinta takes her seat at the table with the rest of the council members. Celladorne looks at the party coldly. Harapel opens the meeting, but gets interrupted by a blessed cat with a fur pattern that resembles Pelor's star. She starts again after the cat is brought out of the room, and says the summer festival was a success. Shalran the Triton talks about fish populations, Mayor Lotho of the Halfling Hills of Bromhead requests paladin reinforcements for his borders, and is denied. Lorgra of the Orc Camps asks for land or resources for her people, gets into an argument with Mayor Lotho, and is ultimately denied. When Quinta is given the floor, she explains how the kobolds enslaved her people and forced them to work. Then she turns to the party as her witnesses. Thalem speaks first, and explains what they experienced from the time they were jumped on the road to what they saw in the dwarven outpost. Harapel points out unreported Dragonrot kobolds are a breach of the pact the kobolds have with the council. Thalem finishes his statement by saying that kobolds were wearing elven-made armor. Celladorne says it just sounds like the goblins and kobolds are fighting again. He asks if the party has any physical proof of these accusations. Leith says she studied in Orlaithir for many years, so she knows for a fact that the armor was elven. Celladorne calls out Leith's statement, asking what her title is. She reveals to the room she is Princess Orlaith, and he chides her for shirking her responsibilities in her homeland. Then he says the solution to all the problems is to allow the elven forest to continue expanding to provide food and shelter for the continent. Harapel gets them back on track. Thalem has Bowie give Ivara the cloth he took from the kobold general to test for elven magic as proof. When Luce mentions they found people who had been turned into statues, they notice Harapel and Ivara share a look of concern. Leith tries to persuade Celladorne. He teleports to the outkeep Leith described. When he returns, he says there was nothing of note at the location, and it appears he wasn't lying, but there's something still off about him. Even the people turned to stone were gone. Leith appeals to Harapel, saying that if Celladorne checked out the outpost, Harapel should too. She teleports and returns. She said she detected good and evil while there, and thinks it would be worth it to investigate the kobolds. Thalem appeals to Shalran, saying that there was a Triton turned to stone in the outpost. She grows concerned if some of her people could also be in danger, and says she will vote for an investigation. Leith appeals to Lotho by saying if the goblins and kobolds are in danger, it's only a matter of time before the halflings are also in danger. Lotho, despite being intimidated by Cyrodiil, says he will vote for an investigation. Quinta motions for a vote. Lorgra seconds the motion. The only members who vote no were Cred and Cyrodiil. Harapel approves of an investigation into the kobolds, instructs Cred to provide a map to their leadership, and will provide 500 gold, a cart, horses, and 2 days of rations for the investigation. The party will leave the following morning, accompanied by a paladin of Pelor to bear witness during the investigation. Harapel closes the meeting. Cyrodiil immediately walks up to the party. He asks Leith if her mother knows where she is, then advises the group not to meddle with things they don't understand. He senses Thalem's ring and recognizes him. Cyrodiil sees right through Luce's enchanted disguise and refers to them as a tiefling. Leith comforts Luce, who is shocked. Luce feels reassured by Leith after experiencing so much hardship throughout their life. Cyrodiil notes Shay is from the Leaves of Orlea. Leith tries to get Cyrodiil to stay a night in Tresdell, but he explains he's busy, dispels Luce's illusionary magic, and dimension doors away. The party invites Lorgra to get drinks later that night, and she accepts. As the party begins to leave, Cred hands Quinta a map to a kobold general. Leith reassures Luce, and says that when she takes the throne, people will be treated better. Luce asks if Cyrodiil could be manipulating Leith, but Leith says that he means well, taught her so much, and wants the forest to protect everyone. Leith believes that the trees can be changed, and they actually can provide for everyone in the land. Thalem and Luce are concerned that Cyrodiil is being manipulative and knows more than he's letting on. The group talks about getting through the Orlathier forest to the Elven city so they can check on Leith's mother. Leith says that she contacted her mother briefly through the tree roots in the Dwarven outpost and received a cry for help. The party makes their way outside, where the paladin Proda greets them and gives them their weapons. Leith flirts with Proda, but his boyfriend, the rogue halfling Bertram, pops out of a bush and shuts her down. Proda gives them a sack of 500 gold and tells them he will meet them the next morning to go on the investigation. Quinta works up the courage to thank the rest of the party for having her back. She walks over to one of the trees, takes out her axe, and goes to hit the tree to cool off. But a calming aura washes over everyone and stops Quinta. Ivara comes out from behind the tree. They encourage the party to bring back evidence, as they have sensed the world has been thrown out of balance. They suggest the party brings Ivara anything arcane to them first, so they can examine it and present the evidence together. They then give Shay an amulet of spell slots. They return the cloth to Bowie's head, saying it was not magical. As the party makes their way back towards the tavern, Leith and Thalem have another chat. Leith explains her partner was a ranger as well, and she thinks her mother chose Thalem to find her because he is similar to her partner. Thalem is still mad at Leith, but Leith gives him a reassuring touch.